What about defenses to lawsuits for employment discrimination? Are there any defenses if you get sued? Is there anything that can get you off the hook? Well, there are a couple of things that may get you off the hook. The single biggest one is probably the plaintiff's failure to prove up his or her case against the employer. When we have an incident, a single incident of sexual harassment, and the employee failed to report it before leaving the employment and suing, the case is often lost by the plaintiff because it's his word or her word against the employer's word, and there's no proof, there's no one else who witnessed it, and it's a he said, she said case. And if there's doubt, the jury is going to decide against the plaintiff. So it is important, if there is an incident of sexual harassment, if there are other witnesses or other victims, that they come forward and corroborate the story, and that you do the required reporting before you leave the company. All of these things create potential evidence that you could use in a trial. The failure of proof is one of the most common successful defenses to these lawsuits. Another one is business necessity. Sometimes a certain amount of discrimination is required. If I'm hiring people to climb up the 50 or 80-foot ladder and rescue people from a burning building, I would really prefer that it be a big burly guy than a 90-pound woman to carry me down that ladder if I'm being rescued from a fire. Business necessity or a bona fide occupational qualification. Bona fide occupational qualification, you may not want to hire a man to be the retail salesperson on the floor of the lingerie department. And I used to say that and no one blinked. In the last few years I've had women in the class challenging me and saying, why not? So I don't know, but in my old-fashioned sense, I wouldn't hire a man to be the sales clerk in the lingerie section of a department store. An interesting one, a really interesting kind of glitch in the employment discrimination laws, is seniority systems. Now, here's what happens. As the economy goes up and the economy goes down, when the economy goes down, we have layoffs, and when the economy goes up, we have hiring back a bunch of people. And if there's a contract with a labor union, the labor union contract usually says when you do layoffs, you lay off the people with seniority last. And when you do hiring back, you hire back the people with seniority first. Well, what this does, it has an unexpected filtering effect, because all the old white guys, they get laid off last in a downturn, and all the old white guys, they get hired back first in a rehiring process. And sometimes when you look around and you say, wow, this is filtering out all the minorities, and all we have working at this company is old white guys. And so this was pointed out as a problem, and they looked at the legislators and said, you need to make new laws to change this. And the legislators said, whoa, we make new laws in this area, we're going to anger the labor unions, and they're one of the most powerful political organizations around. We don't want to make them upset. So how else can we fix this? Well, if we just leave it alone and we wait long enough, sooner or later some of the senior people will be old minorities, and so we're just going to leave this one alone and hope that over time it balances out on its own, because we're not going to fight seniority systems contracted by labor unions. Another one that comes up that's a nasty, sticky thing is, suppose I own a company and a woman has been a victim of some bad harassment. It looks like I'm going to have to pay her a lot of money, and the lawsuit's going on, and my army of corporate lawyers are trying to find some way to get me off the hook. And they say, hey, this gal, she was in that department where some money went missing a few months earlier. Let's accuse her of being the one that stole the money, and say she shouldn't be entitled to damages for losing her job, because she would have been fired anyway because she had prior misconduct. And so this is a nasty thing. And the question is, should evidence of prior employee misconduct be allowed in a lawsuit for sexual harassment on the job? And is it relevant at all to the issue of whether or not this poor woman was harassed on the job? No, not really. It's not really relevant at all. But is it relevant to questions like her credibility as a witness and her integrity? Ooh, it might be. So should we let it in or should we exclude it? And right now what we have is kind of an uneasy compromise that says, no, you cannot allow evidence of prior employee misconduct to be introduced as a defense to a lawsuit for sexual harassment. But if you are introducing that evidence to impeach the credibility of the witness or to discuss the issue of how much damages the plaintiff should be awarded, then sometimes you can allow it in. So that's the position that we're in right now with regard to the question of whether or not a victim of sexual harassment who's suing, whether or not in defense you can introduce evidence of that plaintiff's prior misconduct as an employee.